Hello, welcome or welcome back. Zoya, podcast producer here. This week we're doing something slightly different. We have brought back Neena Saith, who spoke at our Exponential Risk conference earlier this month, to discuss resilience and stress in the workplace. I thought this topic was really interesting and quite underexplored in insurance, and so I decided to ask Matthew some more questions about it. So Matthew, what does managing personal stress in and out of the workplace got to do with our usual topic around data and analytics and innovation in insurance?
Thanks, Zoe. It's great to be a guest on my own podcast. We talk about resilience a lot with regard to how organizations, companies are managing their physical properties from, could be flooding, it could be hurricanes. How do you build better to do that? What we often forget about, though, is that resilience also, as you implied, is about individuals' ability to manage the stress. And we do work in a stressful environment many times of working, and how to balance the demands of an organization with our own health and balance our work life and personal life. And so, having seen how popular Neena's session was, I was really intrigued to dig a little bit deeper into that and just understand about some of the things that she's discovered. And yes, Neena and I work together, so there's a personal context to this as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, Matthew. I'm looking forward to discovering the different definitions of resilience from both personal and back to insurance, where it's traditionally used as a word to do with risk. Well, the InsTech podcast is educational, and we always want our listeners to learn something. What do you want our listener to take away from this week's episode?
Well, we talk a lot about how people, organizations can be more effective, more efficient with the use of analytics. There's all the tools now in AI, but it's not just about the tools you use. We do talk about human in the loop. We haven't totally got rid of people from the analytics. We won't do that for a very long time soon. But humans are not just machines. We all need to look after ourselves. We need to look after our colleagues. And also, as I was thinking about this, innovation, by definition, shouldn't just exist in some special function that's called innovation that goes off and figures out what a new technology is. Innovation is also about pushing the boundaries, and that includes understanding and living by our own personal corporate values. How can we make sure that those are in balance with all the demands in our life? And this can be tricky, but it's also really rewarding, and it's like learning a new skill. So this is about innovation in one sense, but it still comes back to that practical point. I've got a lot going on in my life. What do I do with it? And as you said, we always like to try and find some tips, techniques. Neena was grateful in sharing some books and things with us. So I really enjoyed that conversation with Neena, and I think everyone will get something from this.
Thanks for that, Matthew. I really enjoy this conversation, and our audience will really, truly get something interesting out of your conversation with Neena, which is coming right up.
Neena, it's great to talk to you. As we'll discover in a minute, you've had a few different careers, all really intriguing. We worked together for 9 years at RMS when I knew you in your capacity as a meteorologist and forecasting and modeling, but you're into a totally different world now. We really enjoyed having you at our event a few weeks ago. Your session was packed out for the Exponential Risk session, but we're talking about something a little bit different. So I'm not going to try and describe what you do. I'm going to hand that over to you. But first of all, thanks for joining us. Where are you calling in from today?
So I'm calling in from the New Forest, Matthew. So I'm nestled in amongst the trees with an oak tree leaning across the barn that I'm sitting in.
Well, I'm sure you'll have checked it out for potential risks. So tell me a little bit what happened after 2015 and what are you doing now? Or as we say to people, how are you helping insurers and others solve their problems these days?
Yeah, so when I left RMS in 2015, I had already started diving into understanding the mind-body connection. In my sort of last few years at RMS, I was really suffering with pain in my body, so neck and shoulder pain, and that had led me down the path to sort of look into, well, why? And nothing physical that I was doing was helping with the pain. So, I did everything that people would normally do: change the pillow, change the mattress, sit differently, go to a physiotherapist, and nothing was touching the sides. And then one day I had this realization that actually the pain wasn't a physical thing. It was a manifestation of this buildup of stress. And then once I started to realize that, I also kind of paid attention to how I was feeling. And I think I'd reached this point where my capacity was full. And so anything that came along sort of knocked me sideways. And I just had this realization like, well, how do I get rid of this stress now? So that's sent me down this path to really understanding how do we get to the roots of what's driving us to feel the way we do and to behave the way we do and respond to things that happen in our life. And I've learned a huge amount in the last 10 years, and I've been putting that into practice by working with people on one-to-one and group settings to really help people, firstly, build this internal resilience that can sometimes be eroded away by life events, stressful situations, or just the build up of daily life. And then secondly, help people resolve the build up of stress that has accumulated in their mind and body.
We're going to talk more about it in a minute, but the reason I was really keen to talk to you was we talk about resilience in the world of disasters, protection against natural perils. What most of us, as you yourself did, experience in our working worlds is a different kind of stress, which is these days people are under pretty strict, demanding goals, particularly people when they're in the role that you and I are familiar with, I think more so, of actually responding to providing loss estimates from major disasters. Major catastrophes always seem to happen over the weekend. But I think people in lots of different roles have to report upwards, report sideways, even the most senior levels have to report to investors and board. And there's a kind of, how do they balance that classic work-life balance with being able to communicate, deliver their role, but also not pay the penalties as you described, and they come across in all sorts of different ways. So I just felt that was a really important topic to talk about, and that was borne out by the conference. I mean, one of the things that Claire Souch, who we both worked with and was part of the success of the conference, was very keen to do and sort of brought to my attention was how important this is. And we saw for the conference, which was about education and guiding people in their roles, but also how much of an interest there was in your sessions. Can you talk a little bit about, so what happened after you left the world of sort of catastrophe modeling and analytics and then decided this is kind of where you wanted to take your career?
So once I understood that I was carrying this sort of unprocessed stress, if you like, I started learning and just going on courses. And I had quite a radical change, actually. My pain sort of almost disappeared overnight. And when that happened, I started to feel really different. And hindsight being a wonderful thing, I could then look back and see how I had been feeling. So I think I'd found myself, after a busy day at work, going home and withdrawing. And I think that's quite common. You're in this high pressure environment, and I would get home and have a toddler to deal with. And then my husband's telling me about his day, and it would all be too much. And I'd just need to sort of take myself off, and I would withdraw inward. So I didn't have the capacity for that, which made it very hard to sort of be present for my family. I realised how bad my digestive system had been, which is really common. Most people that I work with have some sort of digestive problems because when we're under stress, our digestive system doesn't get the energy that it needs because our energy is going elsewhere. All of this sort of started to change for me. And then I started diving into why, what has changed now? And this real intricate connection between the mind and the body. We talk about mental health, but actually it's not mental health, it is health, full stop. Because most people that are diagnosed with a mental illness, they feel it fully in their bodies as well. And I've literally just been speaking to someone who's diagnosed with depression, but she says it's a full body experience. And it really is, if you think about how you feel when you're a bit anxious about something, you feel it in your body, your heart races, your stomach turns. when you're depressed, you might get that heavy feeling in the pit of your stomach, or your body feels heavy, or you feel that fatigue and that shutdown. So I'm very passionate now about working with the mind and the body, because they're not separate, and helping bring people that understanding that these are not two separate things and they need to be addressed together.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I'm sitting here trying to get my posture right and breathe deeply and all the other good things I know I should be doing. Some early takeaways. I don't want to suggest we can cram your course and all the good, great one-to-one work you do, but are there some sort of starting points you'd say to people, right, you're feeling stressed, your body is uncomfortable. We all know when we get in that situation. What are the sort of things that we can do to mitigate that, reduce it as a first stage? Clearly, if you can't do that, then you need to go to something a bit more in depth. But is there any sort of early, straightforward techniques you can recommend?
Well, I think the number one, Matthew, is we've got to build the awareness, because I was going through my life and pushing on through without any awareness of what stress was and what it felt like. And, I think we live in this society with a culture of pushing through. And I think particularly in the insurance industry, in the nature of the work, where you're under these high pressure situations and tight deadlines, sometimes you've got to just keep on pushing through, and you don't have the time to stop and listen to your body, or kind of ask yourself, how am I feeling? But it's got to come with the understanding that when you're under pressure for long periods of time, you need to start recognizing when your body is not switching off and relaxing each night. So for me, one of the first things to go was not sleeping. So when I'm on high alert, I don't sleep. And that's a big signal to me that I need to start letting my body know that I'm okay and everything's all right. I need to discharge some of that stress energy. So when you're stressed, your body and mind need to go through a cycle, and that cycle needs to complete. So the first thing is awareness, knowing when you're going into a stress cycle, so that you've got the ability to complete the cycle that it goes through.
And what does that completing the cycle look like? Because I've been through those situations myself. Things are on my mind, not sleep, but other than starting to take medication, which is clearly not the answer to sort of sleep. I'm kind of very intrigued by that. Complete the cycle. It sounds like there are some things we can do to resolve that ourselves.
There's absolutely lots you can do to resolve it yourself. So firstly, understanding that when you're stressed, when you're faced with a stressor, if your brain and body perceive it to be a threat, then one of 4 stress responses will be activated. So hopefully you'll start to feel yourself go into stress response, that flood of hormones, the chemical changes, maybe behavioral changes. And in the case of a pressurized work situation, that stress response might help you focus and get that work done. Now, to complete the cycle, your brain needs to know that you're safe, because that's what will help you come back down to a regulated sort of resting state again. So if that work never ends, if it's a lot of work that has sent you into a stress response and that never ends, you need to find a way to let your brain know that you're still safe and everything's okay. And so there's a number of things you can do. So breathing is one thing. So when we get stressed, our breathing rate increases. So simply by slowing down your breath and making the exhale longer than the inhale starts to send signals of safety to your brain. When you're stressed, your line of vision narrows. So by moving your eyes, so for people to be taking little micro breaks during a really busy time and moving their eyes from left to right starts to send signals of safety to the brain. And again, just letting your brain and body know I'm okay. Movement is another one. I think, again, that culture of being at your desk all day, grabbing some lunch, eating at your desk, and you're not actually discharging that build up of energy in your day. So just taking a sort of 10-minute walk, a bit of a shake off can help. If you've been in a meeting and you've got sort of quite like irate or frustrated in that meeting, literally shaking your body can help. So there is a whole range of things that you can do, both for the short term, but also in the long term, to build this capacity to cope more with whatever you've got going on in your life. And it's working with the brain and the body to build that kind of inner safety so that you can cope with these stressful situations.
It reminds me that somebody mentioned to me, traveled a lot, kind of quite senior executive. He always went to the same hotel chain because the rooms were all designed the same. So to that point, if you're traveling a lot, if the hotel room looks pretty similar, your kind of brain says, well, I know this. I'm not trying to process it all the time. But I just want to sort of come back to people in the workplace and how should people deal with that, in the sense that sometimes you've got to define boundaries, or you talk to someone about it and say, look, I know this is urgent, but I've got to manage my body, or how urgent is this? Because I've only a certain capacity for doing things and I'll do things that are urgent. But how do you help people navigate that? Or, and how do you help organizations, look out for this in their own people?
Yeah, I think there's a combination there of what the individual can do and what the organization can do. So as individuals, it's coming down to that awareness of their own behaviors. Some people, one stress response is called a fawn response, and the way to keep them safe is by pleasing others and not saying no. And so in that sense, people can really wear themselves out and, end up burning out because they're just saying yes to everything and they find it difficult to put up boundaries. And if that's a problem for someone, if someone recognizes those traits in themselves, it's a question of working with those deeper rooted beliefs to change those behaviors, which is something, again, that I do with people to help them shift those behaviors and put up their boundaries. And then for the managers in the organization, I guess there's question of creating a culture of openness and creating an environment where people can safely speak up without judgment, which is really important, so that if someone does feel like they're heading on the road to burnout, or they feel like their workload is just too big to cope with, that they're able to go and talk to someone knowing that they won't be judged and that a solution can be found together. And I think for the leaders in the organization, a lot of that's going to come down to education and awareness for them as well, so that they understand what stress is and the stress cycle and how to recognize it with their employees.
There's also people who get a real buzz out of work, and that sometimes can get quite addictive. And I went through this, and I had a kind of interesting revelation as I was getting to the stage of my life where I think, what do I do when I'm not working full time? And that's also, I suspect, a problem, because there's a sort of adrenaline of working hard and doing things. But your point is, you can't always do that, and you need to sort of be selective of what you do and know when you can say no, and it's okay just to not do anything for a bit and then pick up the things. But it's not always that easy for people, is it? I mean, if you're wired one way, you've got an on-off switch. And
yeah, and I mean, Matthew, we could get into quite a deep conversation here, but again, one of the things I recognized about myself, and I still have to pull myself up on it, is this inability to stop. And so many people have it. And again, when you really look at what's going on, you have sort of developed these behaviors because that's what you feel safe doing. So some people do not feel safe to relax. It's a deep rooted belief that has sort of been wired in from early on in their life. And so they're go, 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 go all the time. And when they've suddenly got time to relax, they're like, oh, no, what am I going to do now? I know I'm on holiday, but let's not stop. Let's keep going. So yeah, it's a thing, and it needs recognizing by that person. It can change. It absolutely can change, but it involves creating a sense of safety to go slow, to stop. We're in this society now where actually even when people stop, they'll pick up their phones and be scrolling. So people always want to be doing, and in a way it's an avoidance of being with their own feelings and, being with themselves.
I'm going to pick up on that because, hopefully everybody listening has somebody in their life, family member, a partner, work colleague, who they got a close relationship with. They can be different relationships, but what are your sort of thoughts, recommendations about someone in that situation? You talked earlier about in your family life. The challenge sometimes is the person that can help you is also the person that's bearing the brunt of your frustration, because they're the one you come home to, and the dog gets a kick rather than a stroke and all the rest of it. But how do you help people manage that? Because those are also the people that know you well and need to be, in a way, your guide as you kind of slow down and kind of figure this stuff out, but are also being impacted by it.
Yeah, from my own experience, I would say be as open as possible. So, and again, I think that will come as you build awareness of yourself. So if I go back to when I was finding I was going home and needing to withdraw, part of that was because I just didn't have the capacity to communicate what was going on inside, and I didn't really know. I just withdrew. But now, if I'm in a situation where my other half is chatting away and I suddenly realize I'm not taking anything in, I will literally say, I don't think I've got capacity to listen to this at the moment. Can we chat later? And he gets it, and that's fine. And then it's not an issue of tension. And I think going out for a walk, that movement, getting outside, is like magic. It can help to clear anything. So that again, we do that a lot, or I do that a lot. And if I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'll go outside even for 5 minutes. It can just help reset me, and I can go in and deal with everything. But I think being open, as open as you can about how you feel, I generally find that people are then understanding and can work around whatever it is you need.
Yeah, and then going back to the sleeping one, certainly my experience has been, if you talk through things in the morning, then you've got the whole day to think about it, and the brain kind of processes it. That actually works well. To sort of have a discussion late at night, you go to bed, and it's like that's the recipe for just not sleeping, because it's quite fascinating reading about how the brain is sort of spending the first half of the night sort of processing things, and the second half is decided what it wants to keep and files it. So the first half of your night, anything you go to bed with, is going to be trying to deal with. So don't load your brain out with stuff to deal with if you can do it in the morning, and let the day sort of evolve along with it.
Absolutely. And just that, having that downtime, you just need to build in some downtime before going to bed, is what I found. And again, when you're working it through periods where you're working really long hours, and then maybe you've got a commute home, and then by the time you get home it's nearly bedtime, and you've got to then get up really early, it doesn't leave much scope for that. And I used to find it really difficult to switch off my brain from work, because I'd already be thinking about what needs to happen the next day, and sort of planning that out in my mind. So yeah, you've got to find that way to let your body know that the day's over and it's safe to relax now and safe to go to sleep. And that's got to sort of happen in between.
And there's a greater awareness of this. I mean, sadly, certainly here in the UK, in the news this week, and I think it's 21 in 15 25-year-olds are actually seeking help for mental health, which is terrible and much higher than it's ever been. But there is a greater awareness of it, I think, which helps. People are talking about it. Are there any kind of go-to recommendations you have for podcasts or books, or anybody you've come across that is just, if anybody wants to learn more about this?
Yeah, and before I mention book or podcast, I think on that note around this increasing number of mental health conditions, I think a really important point is that it's showing is there's something in our system that's not been working. And I believe that because a lot of the solutions out there are not getting to the root of what's driving people to feel the way they are. And I think even the word mental health is part of that issue, because it's not, it's health, full stop. And so one thing I'd really advise people to do is find solutions that are going to get to that underlying why. And that involves working with the mind and body together, not just the mind. In terms of books for anyone that's suffering with anxiety, and particularly, in those younger years, there's a brilliant book and podcast by a guy called Dr. Russell Kennedy. And his book and podcast is called Anxiety RX. And he's a medical doctor, neuroscientist, but basically come into the mind body world because nothing, the medications, the counseling, the psychotherapy, all of that just wasn't getting to why. So, and he's got a brilliant way of explaining it and helping people. And then I'm also a big fan of Gabor Mate and his explanations and the way he educates. And there's a brilliant book called When the Body Says No. So if you want to dive in a little bit deeper to understand that mind-body connection, and particularly maybe if you've got physical ailments and want to understand the why, then that's a great book as well. That's When the Body Says No, The Cost of Hidden Stress.
We'll put those links in the episode notes so people can kind of link on those. That was brilliant. And then, Neena, just a chance for you to talk a little bit about what you're doing, let people know how they can contact you, whatever's useful.
I work one-to-one with people, and I've got some group programs coming up in May as well. All the work that I'm doing is about helping people to understand what's going on with their brain and their body, and give them the know-how and sort of empower them to take action themselves, and then also help people resolve undigested stress that has built up over the years. So there's 3 key points on, and obviously with the one-to-one work, we've got an opportunity to really dive deep together. And the group program's a bit higher level, very educational, but we practice a lot of things together as well. And the groups are kept very small, very nurturing. So that's what I offer, Matthew.
And people just want to go off and Google that now. Hopefully they'll stay to the end of the podcast. But what's the easiest way to find you?
Yeah, so they can find me at neenashealing.com, and that's Neena with 2 E's. And on LinkedIn as well, Neena Saith. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and have a conversation with me there. And I offer a free discovery call as well. So even if someone's listening to this and just curious and wants to chat, feel free to book a call. And then the other aspect actually is, if an organisation would like more education around what stress is, the stress cycle, and how we can take action to sort of process some of that stress, then I can come and deliver workshops.
Yeah, I think it's much needed. We'll just come back to where we started. It was really tremendous to have you joining us for the event a couple of weeks ago. I mean, I've got a great fondness for that community of the analysts, the people that run the models, the people that build them. I mean, there's some really smart people there, yourself included. But it's also, and I'd love to get your perception on this as we wrap up, there's a sort of wonderful collaboration around that. And there's also this kind of natural gender diversity around it as well. It's a meritocracy. People get to where they get to in those roles because they're good and they work hard. I know a lot of them are also stressed, but am I just being sort of misty-eyed because I spent most of my career there and I've got happy memories? Or I'd just love to get your perception of that. You've been out of that industry now for a while. You've seen other industries. Just as we kind of leave it, give me a sense check. Am I come out in the clouds, or is that really as good as I think it is?
No, I mean, Matthew, I loved being back actually, and it really made me smile, and I was really taken aback from the warmth that I felt from that community. I'd been a little bit nervous to step back into it before, so you're not living in the clouds. That I think everything you've described is there, but I think I had some really interesting conversations with people, and stress and burnout is real and it's happening in that world, sadly, and people have been through it, people are feeling it now. The reality is it's the cocktail of the pressures that we face at work with stuff that happens at home. We all go through periods of loss. We all go through things like moving house and all these kind of known stresses that we're all going to face at some time. So, they're there and they're real. And I think as much as people can learn to build resilience and understand what's happening in their minds and bodies, the better. And that's only going to help sort of strengthen that community.
Yeah, and I think as it wrap it up, I think there's a couple of things. So one is people can often look at the sort of those individuals they think are very confident and polished, and often those people are the ones that are struggling the most in other situations, or they just know how to manage it. It doesn't necessarily mean their life's perfect at all. They've just worked out how to sort of balance those. So I think everybody goes through these difficult situations, and I think knowing that means there's no stigma attached. And I really like the fact you said this sort of the label mental health is just, it's important to be able to understand this is more than just physical health, but actually it always has a risk of going too far the other way. And I think that's missing something. And the other thing I'd say is what we wanted to do with that event and bring you along was not just for the individuals to manage stress, but actually for people who are managing people who, of course, got their own challenges, but it's also being aware of this other people, knowing how to help them, and even some of the smaller things you can do just to give people some space or see when they're getting a bit stressed, say, okay, look, just, take some time back. There's somebody we both used to work for who had this great concept about you need to steal time back from your employee. And if you work late, you work weekends, and you work for an organization that's professional and respect you, we'd hope, and that, if you don't work for an organization like this, you probably shouldn't work for them. There are a few days you might go, look, I've got to come in late, I've got to take some time off, I've got to steal some time back. It may not be 1 hour for 1 hour, but you need to sort of work out how do you balance that with your organization. And actually you might be surprised, companies are often more willing to do that than you might expect them to. So sometimes you just need to ask the question.
Yeah, and I think that's where the individual's got to build that confidence to ask that question and know that that's okay. But the organisation can take responsibility to let people know it's okay. So it's that sort of combination.
Well, Neena, that was absolutely fascinating. Thank you again for your time, and thank you very much for your support a couple of weeks ago. And it's been great to see you. And I always felt you were calm, and I think your family might have taken the brunt of it when you weren't at work, but you are particularly calm now. So you are definitely living proof of what you said. So thank you again, and look forward to seeing you again in the not too distant future.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. Thanks for having me.
Well, if you've made it this far, then I'm pretty sure you found that as interesting as I did. The InsTech podcast comes out every Sunday morning, where we spotlight the latest news, leading voices, and freshest updates across insurance that you need to know about. If you would like to take part in these conversations, head to www.instech.co to find out how you can join our network and be a part of the insurance intelligence for the curious.